Bear with me. Okay, the recording has started, and I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully I can get the right one up. Here we go. So what you should be looking at is the packet of materials. I do hear somebody in the background, so please again try to mute yourself if you're not speaking, just for the benefit of everybody. Okay. All right. So what you should be seeing is the agenda for today. And can everybody see that? Okay. Somebody confirm with me that you can see that.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we only have one action item today, and that is the approval of the meeting summary from October 17th. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at it. I'll give credit to Sue Meyer. I know she did because she picked up the typo where we had her name listed as attending 3 times, but I think that just reflects the impact you make, right, on the whole thing. So, but otherwise, I haven't received any comments. Are there any edits or changes to the October 17th summary? And I'm speaking to the official committee members now. Jane, Ashton, Jolene, Katie, Naomi. This would be an action that you would make as official members of the subcommittee. Would anyone wish to make a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve. This is Jane.
Thank you. Is there a
I'll
second?
second. This is Katie.
Okay. I'm turning to my team to say, did you hear that okay? And do you need any clarification? All right.
I'm good. Got it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I will ask for any further comment. And if there is none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? Thank you. The motion is approved, and we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. We wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit about kind of the context of this committee. I will say that we've kind of had this in mind all along, even going back to April of 2023, that at some point there might be a discussion that was larger, that involves maybe recording fees and other things, and now it is very clear that the context of this particular discussion is part of the recording fee and business process modernization project that has been approved by the County Recorders Association. And if you've had a chance to look at the charter document, which I believe has been distributed to all the members of the Recorders Association, in particular, you know that we have established, the association has established a fee planning working group. They held their first meeting in December. Their next meeting is this Thursday, and they're going to continue their review of options for changing the recording fee, either the amount or the structure in some way. A lot of discussion still ahead, and the idea behind that is to come up with a recommendation sometime in June or July, so that we have time to further discuss it with stakeholders and legislators prior to the 2025 legislative session. The Standards Subcommittee and the Associated Document Formatting Working Group are a named part of that process because along with any recommendations in fee policy, it is intended that some type of policy changes or groups of policy changes that would be hopefully actually be a benefit to the stakeholder organizations as well as to recorders would be advanced to show in some measure that if there is a support for providing additional resources through the fee policy change, that some changes will occur, changes for the good. Maybe it might be in the form of new services. Maybe it might be in the form of changes in policy that would make services better or maybe make them easier to use. That is the basic idea. And so the discussion that we're having today is not the only part of that, but it is a piece of it. Couple of updates I can share with you. A surveyors working group has been formed. They actually had their first organizational meeting yesterday. They have decided that they're going to meet bi-weekly, that is once every 2 weeks, to work on the agenda. We discussed the scope of work of all the things that they're going to review. And some of the things that are on the agenda today are a part of their review as well. The first thing they're going to be looking at is the index legend. It's been in force and operational for surveyors since 2017, and there's a desire to look at that to see can it be made better? Are there changes or adjustments that need to be made? And basically, they're going to review both the code as well as ESS policy on that, and they're going to take that subject up at their next meeting. And there are many other topics that they're going to review that we may cross-reference today at one point or another. Another update I would share with you is that, and maybe Nancy might want to chime in on this, but the leadership, Stacy and Nancy, Megan wasn't able to participate that day, but they met with Bill Peterson and Lucius Beacon in our office and had a discussion about how the project should be advanced and supported through the ISAC infrastructure. And specifically, there was a discussion about maybe facilitating conversation with some of the other affiliates, including supervisors and county auditors. So that is underway. And then I'm not going to go through the whole litany, but a number of other things that are described in the charter document are now underway or getting underway, including conversations with the various stakeholder groups. So I just want to bring that to your attention, and I'm sure Nancy or any of us involved in it would be happy to answer any questions that you have, but it is definitely started, and we're looking forward to many good conversations ahead. Nancy or Stacy, do you have any additional comments that you would like to add relating to the overall process?
I just think it was a good discussion. That's it. Phil covered everything well, as usual. So, no. Agreed.
So one of the things that is on our agenda today, and I'm highlighting this now, is that as a part of the charter document, we did identify a number of things that could be under the purview or are under the purview of the standards subcommittee, as well as the working group, the volunteers who said, hey, I want to work on document formatting, and that's really what we're doing today. So you're part of a bigger plan here, and it's a context that we're operating under. The next thing I want to just touch on, and this took up a lot of bullets on the agenda, but we aren't going to spend very much time on it, is that but behind the scenes, we're looking at various project ideas that could be a part of the overall initiative. Some of them will require extra effort. There may be a requirement for some additional investment of dollars to pull the resources together to make them happen. And this is not necessarily the exhaustive list, but they're the things that we're working on behind the scenes right now to begin to flesh out. Some of them are part of the surveyor's discussion. So if you look at the second page of that, there are a couple of ideas about helping digitize historical surveys. And I don't mean to simplify it or make it sound too much like a deal, but one of the ideas is that if we do certain things, we might elicit support from stakeholder groups for the overall initiative, including the fee policy change. We are working in an environment where there are lots of players, and it has to go through the legislature, whatever it is. It's much easier to kill an idea than to make it move forward. And so we're trying to not leave any stone unturned. You know, what are some things that would be good for everybody and could be advanced, but might also elicit the support of our stakeholders and customers. I do not intend to go through this list today. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. I want to make sure everybody understands that no decisions have been made on any of these ideas. These are ideas for discussion and conversation, and some of them won't make it, and maybe a few will, and we'll just have to see how that plays out. But we've kind of had these only as bullet points up to this point, and the intent of creating this document was to provide a bit of an abstract for, okay, what do they mean by that heading? What's the idea behind it? And I would just commend it to you for review and thought, knowing that some of these might gain a little traction and maybe fleshed out even further. So I'll leave it there. Are there any questions? Does anything jump out at you that you'd like to ask right now about this document and any of the ideas represented there?
Was this not in the packet? I didn't see it in the draft packet.
Well, darn, it should have been.
I'm
I
looking through.
We distributed a document that's labeled ESS Standards Packet Final with the word final in it, and that's what we distributed.
Okay, I'll look at that. I might have the wrong one up here,
Yeah.
sorry.
We distributed a preliminary packet, and then this is the final one. So does anybody else not have this? Thank you for asking that question, Nancy.
I found it, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, does anybody have a question about any item on this list that you really need to know now? What do you need to know? I'd be happy to take a stab at it. Okay, if not, we'll move on because we do have real things to talk about. I'm sorry, I should just mention, you've seen this list of forward-looking topics before. There's nothing new in there. I only highlighted item 6 because it's the one thing that maybe is not in that abstract and may not be mentioned anywhere else, but I did want to make sure that I highlighted it. So be sure to look at that one too. All right, so the way we have organized the agenda today, and this is the meat and potatoes of the discussion today, relating to document formatting and indexing policies. So back in April, we worked on a document which was primarily section 1 of 331 606B. And then subsequently, we've had a couple of discussions that we have broadly labeled as homework and sent them out to you and asked everybody to think about it and whatever. And now we're going to go back through everything again. I am generally assuming that we don't have to revisit every item that we discussed previously in section 1, but if anybody wants to, we can. All right. And that information is in the packet, so we're going to bring it up and we're going to introduce it. So I am going to go through, and everything should be in this order, through 331 606B, every section, and we're going to talk about every one. And it is a fair statement to say that the staff, however you want to describe it, are advancing these as ideas that should be considered. And what we tried to do in each document is provide a proposed set of words, language, and an explanation to go with it. So we're starting with the very first sentence of section 1, which currently reads, except as otherwise provided, the county recorder shall refuse any document or instrument presented for recording that does not meet the following standards. And if you read that literally, as well as section 7B, I believe it is, boy, that's a pretty strong statement. Shall refuse. And it's not really very collaborative sounding, is it? Shall refuse. Another part of the code says shall reject. And what we are attempting to do with this language is two things. First is to make sure that it does say that a recorder has the authority. That is, that they may decline a document if something does not meet the standards that are specified in this section of the Iowa Code. The second thing we're trying to do is to be clear about why is this the way it is, and address that question of do recorders record or do they judge the content of the document? And much of the language that we're going to introduce in the discussion today is really intended to reinforce that the reason standards exist mostly in this section of the code is to make sure that the recorder can do their job, that they have the information they need to do the indexing. And so the purpose statement is a little bit more positive sounding, and it intends to convey to the reader that, hey, the reason we're doing this is because we need to have a good index of information about these documents that are being put into the public record. And then it may not be as strong as what it says today, but it clearly states that the county recorder may decline to record a document or instrument. And we're clarifying for the first time in the code that a document can be a physical document, or it could be an electronic document. And some, but not all, of the information, the standards are not just about formatting, but they're about content as well. What information do you have to provide, not only in form, but in substance, so the recorder can do their job? So that's the idea behind that. We're here to receive your comments. And if you feel a preference for posting a note in the chat pod, please feel to do so. So Jane has just entered a comment. Do you think this might encourage inconsistency. Well, no, my answer to that is going to be no, because you have a pretty strong shall statement in there right now, and there is inconsistency. It's hard for me to imagine more being there. And as we go through the rest of the changes, there has been an effort to try and add specificity so that what you need to do becomes clear. So
I'm going to agree with them because I'm not going to have the teeth I need. I know there's going to be one attorney who will argue with me. For sure, if there's just a minor thing, she's going to say, well, it says you may, it doesn't say you will refuse it. I mean, I just think there's going to be some kickback there
mhm.
without a stronger word. That's my opinion because
Yeah.
like I said, I have a attorney I know will argue.
Those darn attorneys.
Exactly.
Would your recommendation be to change it to shall in this case?
I prefer shall, but what does anybody else think?
We already have attorneys that do this now. So,
Yeah, but if you have a code, as when we all know attorneys will argue, shall and may are two different things. And I mean, I know you've got people who let things go, but it doesn't give teeth to the people who really need it. I don't know.
So comments revolving around may versus shall. And would it be a fair statement to say that that the group as a whole, would it be fair to say that the group as a whole would prefer to say shall there instead of may? Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. You know, it's pretty unusual for me to be perceived as the most kind-hearted and lenient person in the group, but I accept your thoughts. So let's assume that we're going to change that to shall. Are there any other changes that you would like to make in this introduction? Do you feel comfortable with the kind of the rationale behind maybe being a little bit more expansive about what are these what does this section of the code exist? And it's to help you do your jobs, and it's there to make sure that the record is correct and complete, right? Anything else? Because we're gonna move on. All right, we're moving on. So the next part is the actual body of the enumerated items in subsection 1. This mostly goes back to um, um, the April meeting, and we've sort of repeated this review a number of times. We haven't gone through it line by line, but um, um, generally, people felt like we were okay with this. I again, apparently I'm the one that's being equivocal on this. But in reviewing this again and again and again, one of the things that occurred to me in discussions, and this actually came out of a discussion with a surveyor, about the question of 20-pound weight. And this I'm gonna maybe admit that might be part of my uh, lack of direct experience in being a recorder. But when we reviewed it the first time, it seemed like, boy, that is really being specific. Does it really need to be there in this day and age? And but when you think about it in the context that 20-pound weight is the equivalent of standard copy paper. It's not like it's going to be a heavy, a minimum is a heavy bond that would be unreasonable or more expensive. It's pretty standard. And then you think about the alternative that, uh, you wouldn't want somebody to submit something on onion skin, right? I mean, that would be difficult to operate within a machine or whatever. So I have to admit, I kind of have had second thoughts about, okay, do we really want to recommend taking that out? Because there might be a good reason for it. And then in addition to that, we are talking about a standard for physical documents, so why not say it that way? So that would be one potential change that I might suggest to all of the other things that we did in section 1. Comments? Is there anything else you'd like to review? Or how do you feel about maybe putting that reference to 20-pound weight back in?
What was that question again, Phil? It's the last thing you said.
The last thing I said was that it does really apply to a physical document. So I've inserted the word physical in there. So the question really is, you think we should change our mind and put that back in, or you want to leave it the way it currently stands? And then if you have anything else you want to highlight and revisit, please feel free to do so. So Aaron has put a comment in and says, we have attorneys who submit paper filings on what seems like cardstock, and we have to adjust our scanner settings, but I've never had the opposite issue. Okay. Fair enough. Maybe we need to add something that says not greater than whatever pound weight the cardstock would be. I don't know what that is, but
Never had that experience.
thank you for your comment, Aaron. What does the group think? Is there an opinion? Leave the change as is, or put it back in, or maybe even modify it to put an upper range on it if it's a physical document.
We've never had an issue. We did have onion skin one time, but we even had to work with that.
Okay.
We have no issues with that.
So I want to clarify. Some of you are saying, "Hey, leave it as is." So when you say that, you're saying, "Okay, go ahead and we can still take out the words of not less than 20-pound weight." That's
Yes.
okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for your input on that. Is there anything else in section 1 from all of your prior conversations and prior conversations that you would like to revisit? Anything stand out for you? I'm not begging you to do it. I'm just making sure that we're providing the opportunity. Okay. So in summary, we're going to leave the revisions to section 1, the enumerated items A through E in particular. We're going to leave those changes as originally decided back in April, including the removal of the words of not less than 20-pound weight. Okay. And yeah, okay. Very good. Thank you, everybody. For those of you, we did write a fairly thorough explanation of all the changes that were made. And so if you need to, please refer back to that. So that brings us to the final 2 subsections of 606B subsection 1, which from the April discussion will not change because we are introducing some new ideas here. So the first idea that is being advanced here is that a question about whether we really need to maintain the current standard of a 3-inch margin across the entire width of the page. I am on, Carolyn, I am on page 21 of the packet. And this is the final packet that was distributed prior to the meeting. The page numbers did
Bill,
get changed.
it's Lisa. She had a question about the e-notary section, having the notary info in the top margin, and that's why I asked what page. So she's saying page 18F, is that right, Carolyn? You can nod your head, we can see you.
In an earlier version, in the preliminary packet, the page numbering was a little bit different.
No, it's page 18, it's 1F where it talks about the 3-inch margin. Allowing that e-notary, sometimes there's e-notary information in that top 3-inch margin, and it wasn't called out. And I just want to make sure that there was consensus that yes, it's acceptable because that's the way it comes in.
Okay. My answer to that is it would be if you agreed to this change. Okay. So the idea here is that a stamp area will be reserved. Same size of stamp area that is required in surveys and plats, and that you would not have to have a white space across the entire 3-inch margin. And my answer to your question, Carolyn, is yes, if there is a submitter that includes some text in the upper 3-inch area, that would be allowed as long as they left the white space for the stamp. That is my answer to your question. So we would not be, here's what we're not saying. We're not saying that somebody can't include the 3-inch margin. We're not requiring everybody to change their formatting. We're creating an allowance that says at a minimum, you have to have this stamp area. But if there's other uses that you have for the top margin, go for it. Because it, and the rationale behind it is we're not impeding the ability of the recorder to do their job. Now, it would be correct to say that, you know, if you just leave that stamp area, what if it has to be restamped? What if it, you know, has to be re-recorded? Fair question. And I think the answer to that is, okay, you may have to submit a cover sheet if you're gonna re-record, because there's otherwise there would be no area for the stamp.
Yeah, here in Calhoun County, we just had one last week that got stamped 3 times, and we barely had room on the top to get that 3rd stamp in because it came electronically. So, I mean, I feel like we still need enough room for 2 or 3 stamps. But I'm new, so I don't know what everyone else thinks.
But if you make them add a cover page to put your new stamp, that's $5 more you get. Kind of the way I look at it.
It's still an option though. I mean, it's
Yeah.
$5 in the course of whatever dollars you've already spent.
So
Yeah, if we don't have room, we make them put a cover page so that we have room to put our stamp.
But I'm fine with allowing something within that top margin. I mean, as long as our stamp still fits.
keep going, guys.
I agree
Any
with
other-
Carolyn on that. I'm not gonna refuse it for the e-notary ID number to be on that, be in that top 3 inches.
I think if you go back and look, like in the 80s when we had like a transfer tax stamp and the recording stamp, we really kind of needed that 3 inches. And now, I mean, if you review documents you recorded this week, think of all that space at the top. I mean, granted, we like that. I'm not going to say that I don't like all that space, but I'm not going to refuse it if, there's room for my stamp and our stamps aren't as large. Plus, we don't have as many of the old stamps like when this, I don't know. That's my feeling, is that we really have to evolve to the times. I mean, if we look at all the different document types we take in now, they're way different than they were in the 80s, the 90s, 2000s. So I think this is just helping us to evolve to the way the industry is. So
Right. My current stamp is 1 inch tall.
Yeah, I agree, Stacy. And I just wanted to clarify that because I know at some meeting, there was some discussion of somebody not accepting it. And I was like, well, in Lynn County, we accept it. So I just wanted to clear that up.
I feel like though, when they come electronically, the Iowa Land Record stamp is way wider. And I had one a couple weeks ago we rejected because there wasn't room to get the little box kind of in the area. So I had to reject it. But now if it would have come into my office, my little, physically my label would have fit.
Yeah. And I would say that, as we go forward, there are some, it just hasn't risen to the top of the priority list, but there are some ideas. We don't want to make it miniature, right? We want it to be readable, but there are some options that we can explore that could reduce the size of the outlaw stamp. So, but it's just not the top priority. But those are types of things can be explored going forward. Any further comments? Naomi entered a message in the chat pod say our timestamps are 2 inches. So, the stamp area that's defined here, which is cross-referencing section 4B, which is also part of 331-606B, that is the section that defines the stamp area for the surveyors. So basically we're saying, hey, same stamp area for surveys and everything. So if you have that much space, then you would be able to fit your 2-inch stamp locally into that area. In fact, when we I'm sorry, I'm going to take you down memory lane, but when we originally set the stamp area for the surveyors, we went back and literally looked at every local recorded stamp and measured them to identify what would be the maximum size that we would have to allow in order to accommodate the current physical stamps that recorders were using. And everybody fits within the space that we have identified. And we've been doing that since 2017. And I haven't heard of a case where there hasn't been room for that in the survey area. So, okay, let's move on. Then the next one is another enumerated item in 331-606B. It's the last one, and it is paragraph G. And technically speaking, if we just follow the letter of the law, every document that came into our office through e-submission that had PII in it you'd have to decline it. But we haven't done that. What our practice has been, we have a statewide redaction system, and we don't really have to worry about PII being on the website because we take care of that. And so, in a way, what we're suggesting here is to codify current practice. Nope, you can't do it. However, if it runs through a PII process, you can accept it. And that is true for both traditional documents, that is physical documents, and electronic documents. So this language is simply intended to continue the current practice. Any questions about that? You're making it way too easy on me, guys. Okay, let's go. Let's do something even more fun, and talk about begin to talk about section 2. So I'm going to kind of repeat the same speech I gave for subsection 1, which is section 2. Has some introductory language, and what we're trying to do here is clarify the purpose of this content. And the purpose of the content is so that you, as recorders, can do your jobs to index the document or instrument in your indexes, in your systems, and ultimately on our land records. And the only other change we're making here is that, given your decision above, the one we just did, there doesn't need to be a cross-reference to a 3-inch margin. So now we've just changed the language around to say, shall contain on the first page of a document or instrument that information necessary. Again, this is the introduction to that section. So given your earlier decision, this is a fairly minor wording change in my mind. And again, adding language to restate, hey, the reason we're doing this is because we need your help. We need your information indexed. Does anybody have any issue with that? Okay, before we leave this, I'm sorry, I heard somebody starting to say something. I'll be quiet. I thought I did anyway. Okay, before we leave this, then I just want to point out we might come back to this. And the reason we might come back to this is depending on what you decide on the subject of the index legend. Okay, so we might want to make a corresponding change back here. We haven't decided that yet, so we're putting it on the shelf and we'll come back and visit it. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't want to go too fast. Any questions about the suggested change to the introductory statement to section 2 of the code in
So,
331 606B? Yes.
so I don't know, are you on page 24? Or are you still on page 23? I would just like to add like with addresses, like an email address to get a hold of people.
We can talk about that. What I'm looking at right now doesn't refer to any addresses. Okay. This is only the introductory statement in section 2. So believe me, I've got a spot for you to talk about addresses. I guarantee it. Okay. So now let's look at 331 606B. And let me make sure I've got this up here. So what I want to share with you, this is kind of hard to see sometimes, so want to make sure I've got this up for you. Okay. Yeah, bear with me here for just a second. Okay, so I think it would be important for you to, if you can, look at the explanation at the same time you're looking at this. So listed below, you can kind of look at the explanation part at the same time that you're looking at the proposed amendment. I want you to think about this in the following context, and that is, there are parts of the code that tell submitters what information they have to provide, and there are other parts that speak to what recorders have to index. Okay, and they go together. you kind of want to read them together at the same time. So at our previous discussions about this, one of the things that I got feedback on and really received a sense of kind of what people wanted to do. There are certain things that that nobody wanted to get rid of. In other words, in paragraphs in the enumerated lettered paragraphs, there would be things that that address the there would be things that address the content that needed to be provided that maybe me, because I'm not a recorder, I would say, what the heck is that there for? It makes no sense. Let's get rid of it. But there could be unintended consequences of that. So the message I got was, don't take anything out. We can maybe change the order. We might change the wording a little bit, but don't remove anything entirely. So that's the first thing I want to say to you is that nothing in the current 331 606B subsection 2 in those enumerated items, I have not removed any idea or concept. As we go through these, you should find everything to be there, but they're just not there in the same order. And then the other thing I'm trying to do with this revision is to align the things in the enumerated list to match the things that are in chapter 558 about the things you need to index, so that they're essentially in the same order. And you could do a one-to-one correspondence if you were reading them. And I'm just going to skip ahead here just a little bit. And say, I'm sorry. So if I go ahead to this section, you can see in 558 49 as it currently reads, starts with grantor, grantee, date and time, and the date of the instrument, and so on. And we're trying to align with that as best we can. So going back to the list, we start with the document title. So if you look at the current code, the statement refers to, and in fact, what is in 558, it refers to the nature of the document. It's kind of strange wording, but what we're really getting to is the enumerated listing needs to include a title for the document. Tells you what it is. It's a deed. It's an affidavit. Whatever it is, and so we list that. And that item, what is now item A, is the same thing that is an item D in the current statute. Okay. Next, B and C, grantors and grantees' names. That is the same as what is in letter paragraph E and F in the current statute. All right, so that's the same. Something new that I'll be interested to see how the submitter community responds to it. But we're going to say for the first time that they need to include a post location information, if applicable. And that includes section, township, and range, and quarter section, and lot block, subdivision name, and city or town, if platted. Why? Because that's what you guys index, right? And we want every county to be indexing the post location information because we want the search application to work correctly. So it has to be there. It might be easier for you. I don't know that for sure, but I think it would be easier for you if it were listed out in in that first page somehow. That does not mean that we're removing the requirement for the legal description, that we're keeping in item I, but it, which is the same as letter H of the current statute, but the legal description information may be what you currently use for indexing, but wouldn't it be better if they parsed it out for you so it were easier to index? So again, we have not removed the requirement of the current statute to say you have to include the legal description, but we are adding in the idea that you need to include the parsed location information. To me,
Bill,
that's your benefit. Go ahead.
Miranda made a comment.
Oh, thank
She says, can we combine this
asked
with
if
the
we can
legal
combine
one?
it.
It could
Yeah,
state-
could we,
Yeah,
Okay, so
could we make it one big thing? So that way it says full legal description plus parse legal information? Because typically that's where we're seeing it in documents now. They have the legal and then they put the PIN numbers right below it. So we just keep on indexing.
okay, so in other words, you would like them grouped together. Is that what you mean? You know, when you're looking at it, is that am I understanding correctly? Having them grouped together.
I was just thinking of just combining these two letters and instead of having them be two separated letters in our list, can it just be one
Okay,
requirement?
so it would say
That's just me.
so would it say something like a full legal description of the property if required, including the parcel location information, so that it's all together? I'm getting that. Is that the idea?
that sounds good to me.
Okay, so so noted. It wasn't my intent or our intent to make them not grouped together or to I just know that in some documents, you know, they'll refer to it full legal on page whatever. And my question to you would be, wouldn't you at a minimum want to have at least that parts information on the first page so you wouldn't have to go back to the appendix to see the full legal description, or are you okay with that if they're grouped together? Because that was the idea. Let's see what we can get on the first page, even if the full legal doesn't fit.
I think it's pretty rare in my county, at least, that we have legals on the first page anymore because so much of our rural property is being divided and has these giant descriptions that are
So
paragraph long. So, and this wouldn't necessarily dictate where it is on the document.
Yeah,
So-
if they
so-
indicate where it is, we can at least flip to that page.
Yeah. So, okay. I hear consensus around the idea of combining these two items, and that usually it would still be on the first page. Is that a fair summary? Am I capturing the recommendation?
So say that again. Are you gonna?
I
or-
would say you guys want me to condense item D and I into one, and that you're okay with that, because in most cases the legal description does fit on the first page. That's kind of what,
The full legal is always required. I mean, we can't have just a parsed one, but we can index a parsed one.
yeah.
At least get
I-
the document.
And
Well, here's
my only problem is sometimes if there's a full legal, some of these that don't use Iowa docs, that legal might not get to until the second page. So it's not going to be on the first page, depending, because I have some like court officers' deeds and stuff that have an extra lot of information about the decedent and stuff. I've seen the legals on the second page.
So I'm going to repeat my thought. The main idea that we're trying to get to is to facilitate your indexing job is to have the parts information there on the first page. And that if they want to put the full legal, which might be who knows how long, where they put that doesn't matter. I suppose you might look at it if you would say, well, I'm gonna make sure they got the post information correct, but I'm my interest was to save you work. I may have failed on that. So the
No,
way
I'm
I
just saying it could say see attached.
Yeah.
That's still possible.
okay.
Right.
Now, as we get through this, I do want to point out that item J is, instead of being in subsection 3, the way the current code reads, item 3 is substituted with item J. And so now that phrase, a page reference within the document, if there is sufficient space for placement of any information as required by that section. So you do want the page references, which could be the legal description, sending you where the full legal description is. But to do your job, the idea would be to have the parsed information definitely on the first page. Does that make sense? So the idea of having a page reference is still there. We just put it in a different place. So kind
I
of
think
where
that makes sense to keep it and just move it.
here's where I think we are. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I still hear consensus for the idea of maybe moving up that full legal description reference and combining it into one with the post location information so that it's together. That's kind of still where I hear you are at.
That's what I hear.
Yes.
Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, so, all right, thank you for stopping me on that, and we can do that in the next generation. I will be sure to incorporate that together, and hopefully I can get it written correctly, but I hear what you're saying, and we can do that. Item E, the date on which the document was executed, which would be what we understand the instrument date to be. To the best of my knowledge, there's nothing in the current statute that says that you should include the instrument date on the first page. It may be dated on the first page, but it's not like one of the required enumerated items. But so because we are wanting to more consistently index that information and have it displayed in search results, that is the reason why we say, well, we should actually list that because it's something that we're interested in and has some merit and use. Even though many of you already do that, maybe it should be in the list. And so that's why it was added. Okay. Then item F relating to the parcel identification number, which is very similar to item H in the current statute, maybe worded a little bit differently. For any instrument of conveyance or for any survey or similar documents related to a property, the parcel identification number. So I think the new element here is to actually more explicitly reference survey documents in addition to conveyance documents. And my main point in going through this is just to emphasize everything that was in the current statute, one way or another, is still in the updated. Sue has added a note to saying the only data UCC has is your recording date. That's all. And then Miranda added a comment that UCCs are in the exempt list, right? So maybe that doesn't matter.
I just index our recording date as the document date. That's always done it that way here. Since they changed the UCC law back in, I forget what year. I think I have it in their desk drawer though.
So does the fact that UCCs are in the exempt list address your question about it not having an instrument date? Does that satisfy?
Everything they printed yesterday.
Yeah.
Right, correct.
Okay.
My thought here was, well, I would rather see that maybe as an what's the word? Unnumbered paragraph, because they're not always on the first page. I mean, typically documents are prepared and then there's a signature, and that's where, in my opinion, the date really could be. So
Okay.
I would prefer to see that not required on the first page. I mean, if you've got a lease that's 10 pages long, they're not going to always date it on the first page.
So I don't mean to skip ahead, but let me add in this thought that if you approved of the idea of an index legend, and they included it in the index legend, so they wouldn't actually be it wouldn't actually be the date that the signature is there. They'd just be saying, okay, we did it on that date. We're going to put it in the index legend. So theoretically, it could be on the first page. But your suggestion, Nancy, is to remove it from the enumerated list. To essentially, effectively, you're removing the requirement that it be on the first page.
Yes, just that it doesn't have to be on the first page.
Okay.
Unless we go with an index legend, which that's not what we're talking about right now.
Right. Fair enough. So we'll bookmark it in that context, but otherwise your suggestion is to take it out of the enumerated list. Okay.
Just
And
my
then,
opinion.
yeah, absolutely. And then the next one is the recording reference number of an associated document. Now, if you read the current code, it doesn't say it that way. It's somewhat ambiguous as to what they mean by that language. My interpretation of the current code is that what they're really talking about are associated references. It's item I in the current statute. So in an effort to try and be more clear, we would actually say a reference number of an associated recorded document. And in the policy that has been previously approved by the Standards Subcommittee in the ESS policies and procedures, the specific associations are the things that are identified, and they're repeated here. So the associations between conveyance documents, associations between mortgage and satisfaction, and so on. That is the same thing that it hasn't been adopted yet formally by the ESS committee, but that's what we said we want the reference numbers to be. And kind of a strong message I've heard from the subcommittee in previous discussions is, hey, we don't want to be the researchers. We want the submitters to be telling us what those associated references are. And so, okay, let's add that to the list. If there's an associated reference, you have to list it on the document. So, and if it is, then we will index it. So that's sort of the rationale behind that. Questions about that one? Okay, then we kind of have talked about items I and J, but we haven't talked about item H, and that is the name of the taxpayer and the complete mailing address, which is identical to the language in item B in the current statute. So again, I would say, gosh, I just must be dumb, because if you list all grantor and grantee names, didn't you get the name of the taxpayer in there somewhere? So anyway, I don't want to make an unintended error, so I did what you told me to do, and I kept it in there. It's just in a different spot in the list. Okay, now, outside of the enumerated list, and this is where we get into the discussion about the addresses, there is a current statement in the current code that says any address required by statute needs to be included. Okay, doesn't necessarily have to be in the enumerated list, but we are saying, yes, any other address required by statute has to be in the document. And so we kept it. It's just not in the enumerated list anymore. And then last but not least is kind of getting to the actual address question. A document or instrument shall also contain the name, mailing address, and phone number of either the person who prepared the document or instrument, or if the document is an official form, the person best able to address any issue affecting the recordability of the document. If a document or instrument is presented in electronic form, the information about the person may be submitted as metadata, which accompanies the document or instrument. And we've got a closing paragraph here, but that's a separate issue. So let's just talk about the address information. And just to try and be somewhat helpful on this, if you look at the explanation section, it goes into some further narrative, which I'm not going to read to you, but it's there to just talk about, what do we mean? What do we need? And at our last discussion, there were some who said, hey, that preparer is meaningful, it's historical, or whatever. And sort of different from who do I need to talk to get the issue corrected. And fair-minded people can disagree. I've sort of taken the position here that the prevailing winds are things are being automated. The preparer is probably artificial intelligence anymore, in many cases. So who's the person that's going to help me fix the error in the document seems to me the more important piece of information. But the way this paragraph is written, basically we're leaving that up to the submitter. So you got a bunch of ideas there rolled into one. Have at it.
I'm not shy. I'm going to speak up about the return to. I would rather have the return to put in the enumerated. It's not clear here. I don't know why. I've got to know who to return that document to. So, because we do have a lot of paper documents and always will have paper, in my opinion. And until way past I'm gone. Anyway, I don't know why we need to take that out of the enumerated for the return to. And as far as the metadata, that doesn't show on to the person who goes and gets a copy of this document. He's not going to see that metadata. If they go online to land records, they're not going to be able to see the metadata for the preparer. And the preparer, as we've discussed, is important to a lot of people. Or even if it's who to contact, that metadata doesn't show on the document.
That is true. It's hard for me to judge that. You guys have more direct experience, and do people really look at that or not? I think there's a difference between what you want to have so you can do your indexing job versus what's going to be valuable to a person. So
that is valuable to a lot of people. We have people that ask, well, who prepared that?
But you don't index it. Some
Some people do.
do you think everybody should index it?
I'm sorry, that's not the return. I'm talking the return to on that, sorry.
Okay,
But everything that's in the document isn't indexed. I mean, there's, tons of information in there that's
Right.
not indexed. It doesn't mean it's not valuable to the person looking at it.
but this section is about things that you need to do indexing of. So, we could, if we could say that in a different spot or in a different way. That's why I took it out of the enumerated list. It's still a requirement. It still has to contain that information, but it doesn't necessarily have to be included in the spaces where you are doing your indexing from. That's the idea. I did not suggest, I'm not suggesting that it be removed entirely, but do you need it to do your indexing? And that's why I took it out of the enumerated list in the draft.
Okay, Jolynn said they index to prepare and return to in their system. This doesn't say this is all that we need for indexing, though. I mean, we may use that for indexing, but these are just things that need to be on the document, in my opinion. It doesn't say these are required for indexing.
Well, I get what you're saying. I'm only explaining the rationale of how this was put together, and to say that there are certain things that really need to be in there because it helps you do your job. There are other places that, if somebody's interested in that, they and it's not a universal practice, then it could be anywhere on the document. If it's just there for a historical reference, so.
Miranda had made a comment over there, Phil, too. I'm just going to go ahead and say my opinion is that it's just easier to have this list all together enumerated, even if we do or don't use part of it for indexing. Just so a person looking at this say, oh, well, now these are the things that are required, but wait a minute, there's another paragraph down here. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. Can I just ask a general question? What proportion of counties do index prepare / return information, do you think?
Got it.
We don't have how many counties on here. We'd have to take a poll now,
Yeah,
statewide. I don't know.
yeah,
Miranda says they do.
yeah. Okay. Very good. Does anybody, so I think the main point that I take away on that particular point is, would you just simply move the language that I have highlighted up into the enumerated list?
I would say so. Come on, people, speak up.
I'm okay if you decide to do that.
Yeah, and is this where we could include the preparer's email address to get a hold of them? We've had one attorney that doesn't have his correct phone number on all of his documents, so we have a heck of a time trying to get a hold of him when we get something from him.
I wonder, we probably couldn't require it though, because not everybody has one. But maybe if possible or whatever.
Do you think changing the code to say either phone number or email address would be an option? One or the
Yeah.
other?
That's a good idea, Carolyn.
I kind of like that idea. So
I do want to just caution about email addresses, because you know, you are, and you're inviting spam if you put email addresses in documents. So I'm not sure the preparer or the submitter would really want to do that. Okay. So, I thank you for the input on this. As of this moment, we're going to move that paragraph up into the enumerated list. And we'll see if we can come up with better ideas. I want you to keep thinking about this, but I have no problem putting it back in the enumerated list. Then to conclude this section, the last paragraph we have, and I will read this one. The information specified in this section is for the purpose of providing the information necessary for recording and indexing a document or instrument and to facilitate public access to information. Document information necessary to execute a transaction or to have legal effect shall be included in a document as determined by the parties in accordance with established legal standards. And I think that, again, we're repeating that the information being asked here is primarily to assist you with indexing. And the statement is there to kind of differentiate and say, hey, recorders are not the lawyers. We aren't here to judge legal effect. The people who decide that are the parties to the transaction. Period. End of story.
There are
So-
some comments about the email there, Phil. I don't know if you're seeing those.
I'm going to go back to those.
Okay.
I will go back to those. So, let's go ahead and do that. Well, I'm reading the comments that, you know, email is more effective because it's easier to contact who you're trying to reach. We, in the e-submission world, we do address this because we have the ability to facilitate communication with the submitter, the individual submitter, and that's why we promote e-submission, because, you know, when we are doing the e-submission process, that's not doable by the public. And so we can exchange that kind of more detailed contact information in that context because we're business partners doing that. It is a different story in terms of impact on users if you begin to specify email addresses. So, you know, somebody mentioned DOBs. Well, right now, DOBs are not recorded. You know, they're not on the web. They're not on the internet. So there's really no issue there.
But Miranda has a good point. It would be up to the submitter.
Yeah.
To put their email if they want to, because even a phone number, you're going to get spam with those. I get them all the
Yeah.
time.
We got it.
I would just say that, you know, if you put email in the enumerated list, it would be interpreted as a requirement. Unless you said something like, you know, as an option, the preparer may provide their email address.
And I think that's what she meant.
Yeah. Okay. So, incorporating a reference to email in that information, but as an option, is sort of what I hear folks saying. Does anybody disagree with what I just said? Okay. We can do that. Or Aaron suggested maybe we can have something that maybe it's a little bit less direct, like direct contact information.
That's a
Okay.
good suggestion.
We can work on that. Okay. So the next time you see this, there will be some references incorporated into the language. Let's go back to that last paragraph. Is everybody okay with the statement that kind of puts the legality issue in the hands of the parties, and saying, hey, this isn't really the recorder's job. And the main thing that we're trying to do here is facilitate the recording and the indexing process. Anybody object to that? Okay. I'm moving on. Okay. So I'm referring now to subsection 3, which, as you'll remember, in the current code is where the language about the page reference number is, but we've moved that into the enumerated list. So that opens up the opportunity to say, well, what else can we do with that subsection? And here is where the idea of an index legend is being introduced. And actually, we're doing two things. The first is that in kind of researching this further, an awareness appeared that, people are using cover sheets, but there's nothing in the code that defines what a cover sheet is or how it should be used. And so maybe there should be. And what raised that question is that when we did the groundwater hazard bill a couple of years ago, one of the things that we observed is that attorneys were putting the attestation statement about, there is no well or whatever that language is. They were putting it in the cover sheet, which is not really part of the legal instrument. And they probably should not have been doing that. I say that I'm not an attorney, but it didn't really belong in the cover sheet. So to partially to address that issue, we're saying let's put something in the code that does explicitly state that the information that is required on the first page can be included as a cover sheet, and you have to pay a recording fee for it. Okay, because the current code does nothing about that. And so we would say in this new section that in lieu of providing the information on the first page, the information may be provided in one of the following alternative forms. The purpose of these alternatives is to provide the preparer with the means to effectively communicate information required by a recorder to fulfill their recording duties. And the first option is a cover sheet, and the cover sheet or cover page or sheet may be used to accompany a document being submitted for recording. A cover sheet shall be included as the initial page of a document or instrument and recorded contemporaneously. This is what makes it a chargeable act, recorded contemporaneously as an additional page of the document or instrument. The cover sheet may include a page reference for the document or instrument where information is located, an attestation statement, or any information intended to have legal effect shall not be included on a cover sheet. And so it's basically enabling legislation. Yes, it's okay to use a cover sheet. Yes, it's okay. You're going to be charged a recording fee for that page, whatever that is. And you shouldn't be including legal transactions or other legal effects on a cover sheet. Then the other option that we're introducing here is the index legend. An index legend may be incorporated with the first page of a document or instrument or with a cover sheet. An index legend, if utilized, shall be configured in a compact grid format to provide the information specified in section 2, which may include the page reference of the document or instrument where information is located. An index legend, if included on the first page of a document or instrument, other than a plat or survey or drawing related to a plat or survey shall be placed at the top of the page. And then it refers to the fact that the cover sheet and the index legend has to conform to the formatting standards, and perhaps give us the authority in ESS to establish more specific requirements if necessary. Thoughts?
Can I say I had one of my prior county attorneys put it to me like this? He views the first page of a recorded document, even if it's a cover page, as part of the legal document because say he should have to go to court and through the discovery phase, he's not going to look in his files for the original document with the original signatures. He's going to get a certified copy from me, and that's what he's going to present to the court. So his view is that cover sheet with our recording stamp is fully part of the legal document. So he preferred that anything should be allowed on there.
So Miranda, you think that the legal things like an attestation statement should be allowed?
I don't necessarily have an opinion on it, but he was open to give his opinion back when, I mean, this was 2 county attorneys ago. He's the one that brought up the fact that it didn't matter what was in his files. It didn't matter, you know, the e-submitted document. He needed a certified copy from us, which often included our cover sheet with that stuff on it. So to him, that was the complete legal document. I don't care one way or another. I'm just saying from an attorney perspective, it was very different from what I had been taught.
So when I read this, Phil, are you intending this to mean that the cover sheet is part of the document? Because it says as an additional page of the document, and you're talking just fees there. So we don't really have anything that says this is part of the document.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying it becomes a legal part of the document, but it becomes a part of the recording package that you can charge a fee for, right?
Okay.
And this kind of assumes that you keep the model of charging per page, right? And you know, if you were charging a recording fee, a flat fee, maybe that doesn't matter anymore. And then as far as I understand, county attorneys can have their opinions. I'll defer comment on 99 county attorneys. But I will tell you this, that as somebody who was present when the groundwater hazard bill was approved, it was very clear that the attestation statement had to be on the first page of the document. Every legislator and our lobbyists would, sorry the pun, attest to that. You know, so, you know, it's kind of weird to see so many attorneys. I mean, I don't know the total statistics, but we did a sample once, and 10% of the groundwater hazard statements included the attestation statement on the cover sheet. So, you know, I'm guessing that however we advance this, the Bar Association is going to have something to say about, you know, whether it's okay to do that or not. And I'd be okay with that if they just answer the question. And maybe this ends up saying that you can include legal effects on a cover sheet. But
yeah, it says it shall not be included. So if that gets past the attorneys,
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. So, in my common experience working with lawyers, when you're executing a document, the cover sheet that is going to be submitted with the document to get it recorded is usually not present. And so you can't say it was part of the transaction because it wasn't there until they assembled it to send to the recorder. That's the logic of it from my point of view. The key issue here is, which is, in my view, we're just legal. We should have just put in the stamp of approval on cover sheets, pretty much with current practice with a minor variation. The big policy question is, how do you feel about the index legend?
I think it sounds good as it gives us all the information. I mean,
So are they gonna like list out which are the grantors and which are the grantees? Because I'm sorry, there's lawyers that don't have a clue with that. I deal with them every day.
amen.
And Lord have mercy, they can't read a legal description to save their soul.
I think we could, if there was a desire to make sure that if they specified or they used an index legend, they'd have to enumerate the grantors, grantees separately. We could do that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a paper document or a piece of a document, they still don't know. So,
Yeah, the way this is written, it would apply to both physical and electronic documents.
right.
It just gives them the option of the cover sheet or the index legend put
Yep.
on a cover sheet. And I'm
well,
fine with that.
Yeah, so a cover sheet or index legend would apply to both physical and electronic documents.
I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea. I just know that some of these people struggle with what's what and who's who on a document.
And we ignore what they put anyway. I think it's good to have finally something in there that mentions this cover sheet, so we have some teeth again.
I see Stacy entered a comment about font size and index legend. So with the changes that you've made in the earlier section, the standard font size has to be 10 point. And that would be, and I just would emphasize, I'll highlight it again, a cover sheet or index legend shall conform to the formatting standards specified in this section and other specifications established by the County Land Record Information System, which is ESS. And so I would absolutely stand by 10. You gotta have, if you're gonna have it, it's gotta be 10 point. Okay. Thank you. Further comments? So the main change, sorry, I spaced it off. We were gonna make one change to the cover sheet area. Somebody remind me what that was. So, Lisa, or who's, or did I just imagine that?
Is it the email address?
Thank you for the contact information. We're gonna add some language in there about contact information. Are there any other changes to this section? Okay. Let's move on then. So this gets into 331-606 and 558-49. And really what we're trying to say is that this is in the recording requirements, and what we're saying is the recorder would need to index the information that is specified in 55849, I know this is somewhat redundant, but it's basically saying the index requirements are what the things that you specified in 331-606B, subsection 2, in those paragraphs that we just reviewed earlier, and in whatever 55849 says. And then associated with that, looking at 558.49, there are some things that maybe just need to be clarified. Don't know when it was last updated, but for example, item 3, the date and time when the instrument was filed. Well, what does filed mean? To me, filed is when you submitted it. And probably what they mean is when the instrument was recorded by the recorder. Okay. And the next one, the date on which the document or instrument was executed by the parties. That just seems to be a better way to say it. It's the instrument date. Let's be more clear about what that is. The current code says the nature of the instrument, and I don't know what they meant by the nature of the instrument, but I'm interpreting that to mean the nature of the instrument is kind of what it says. And usually the nature of the instrument is reflected in the document title. And so why don't we just say that? The nature of the instrument as indicated by the title of the document or instrument. And then item 7, the description of the real estate affected by the document. The code says that you're supposed to include the description of the real estate, and why not state it the way it is, as indicated by the parcel location information, including the quarter section, township, and range, or the lot, block, subdivision name, and city or town if platted. That seems to be a more clear understanding of what the description of the real estate means. So I'm not really trying to change law here, but trying to get them lined up and to be more clear about what is intended.
Phil,
I just-
the only
comment.
issue I have here is we have many documents that are signed by different parties on different dates. So the date executed, I can't put in 5 dates in my indexing system.
Mhm.
And already the date of the instrument is sometimes arguable by, some people say it's the first date the first person signed it. Some people say, some of them actually say it was dated this day and that's what we use. Otherwise, I go by the first date on there. Some people use the last date on there. But I have no way to put in 5 dates because I
Right.
have deeds that are signed by heirs at law and there may be 5 or 6 dates on there. So I would not be able to index that.
Great point. Should we say one or the other? I think that's a reasonable concern.
Yeah, and Jane's right. Sometimes the notary date is even different than the signature date. So
That just ain't right.
no, it's not.
Yeah, if the notary date doesn't match the signature date, I decline it. But one other thing also on the legal, after city or town, can we add county? The county also where the legal is? Because I've had ones that have made mistakes that say it's in Carroll County or Webster County and it's in Calhoun County.
Yeah, county would be good.
I agree, because we have a lot of, if it just says Lynn County, it doesn't say whether if it's in Cedar Rapids or in Marion or whatever. I agree with that. Or else we say something about having a complete legal description. I know in Lynn County, some of the issues we have when a homeowner tries to do their own deed is that they use the assessor's partial land description that doesn't entail the entire or complete legal. I don't know if other counties have that same issue.
We do, and we decline them.
Yeah, they get turned away.
Yep, we decline them too, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to, make that language clear. Not that it'll probably help with the individual homeowners, but
I would welcome any, if you wanted to send a note with some ideas on language after the meeting, that would be great. the specific suggestion I hear is inserting the word county along with the city or town.
Yes.
Is that what I understood? And we can do that.
Sorry, I had to grab a phone call. Which line are you talking about?
We are on 558.49 in the materials. We're on page 28.
Yep, okay.
Well, and I
So-
would say some of our farm ground that will not have a city, but it should say the county. So I don't know how we could word it because it might not have to say city or town.
It says
it-
it's platted though.
Well, I have observed looking at the indexes that, you know, if there's no, there are circumstances where if there is no city or town, that the county is put in the county name. I have observed
Mhm.
that. And maybe that just needs to be changed as the title that's being used to allow for that if necessary. In most cases, it is city or town if it's platted, but not always. Sometimes it gets platted in the county and then it becomes part of the city after the fact. That can vary. I do want to capture this idea, though. Not trying to answer it definitively now, but perhaps in our discussions with some of the stakeholders, maybe we should clarify: should it be the first date or the last date? So I want to make sure we capture that idea.
Yeah, because then I would want to leave in the date of the instrument.
Right.
Because like I said, we don't have room for all the executed
Right.
dates.
Yeah. I mean, if that's what they leave you with, then you do have to choose, right? So it'd be good to have some consistency there. Okay, good. Any other? Are we okay with the rest of it with those modifications? Okay, I'm moving on, and this part will real quick. 331-606B subsection 4 speaks specifically to the surveyors relating to the index legend and the stamp area. Given the approval of the items with regard to other documents, that potentially could be combined, but there are currently no specific changes recommended to this subsection. So, any comments or thoughts on that? So I think we can explore the idea of combining those ideas, but as far as policy, we don't have any changes to recommend. And then again, in terms of the stamp area, this is where the size of the stamp area is specified, and the size is 2.5 inches high and 3 3/4 inches width. So if we did try to combine them, we'd have to make sure that was in there some way, but there's no intent to change any of that. The next subsection is subsection 5, paragraph I, after subsection 5, and then we took a look at groundwater hazard as a specific question. And the general question for the group is, are there any changes that anybody wanted to suggest with regard to the list of exempt documents? You know, we're going to be messing with the whole section anyway. If you had anything, I asked a question of Sue in a conversation. Hey, groundwater hazard statement, you know, it pretty much conforms to the formatting standards now, the way it is designed. We could, you know, is that something we want to change? The exception was it doesn't usually include the prepared by return to type of information the way other documents do. And we kind of ended up deciding maybe we should just leave that alone. So general question for the group, are there any changes that anybody wanted to suggest with regard to the exempt list?
Because we still don't require the prepare information on the groundwater, so I would say we just leave it where it's at this point.
Okay.
Are we looking at any changes though on that groundwater section?
Um,
They
uh,
turn most of their stuff electronically now, like my health and zoning person says that she just logs into the skate system and looks at all the stuff. So she
Yeah, but
doesn't
we're still getting a
computerize.
lot that send us pictures and everything. We don't want those. All they have to have is that certificate. If we, I don't know, maybe educate people more. I mean, we've tried.
yeah,
But I didn't know if there was something in code that mentioned this new area where they can pull those up. That might help.
okay. So the suggestion is to maybe look for an opportunity somewhere, maybe not here, somewhere in the code to more explicitly state the minimum that's required to avoid all of the extra stuff.
Yeah,
And
Yes.
we can do that. And I think we can definitely work on some educational pieces going forward as well. So very good. We're almost done with 331 606B.
I'm not on mute right now.
This is really intended to be more clarifying and maybe a little bit more language friendly. Not a big policy change, but again, it basically relates to the requirement that if you decline a document, you should tell the submitter why. And again, we're trying to be more friendly. So instead of using the word reject, we use the word decline. And in addition to that, we're adding the statement, whenever practicable, the recorder shall advise the submitter of any steps necessary to correct the document or instrument. So that's sort of standard operating procedure now. Anyway, so Miranda expressing a concern that sounds like giving legal advice. Would you feel better if it made any if it said something like correct the format of the document or instrument? Because that's really, I think maybe in terms of I think you had a good point. We don't want to make people think that you're going to be giving legal advice. So I accept.
That's
I,
better,
I,
yeah.
I support the idea of clarifying that. Thank you for mentioning that, Miranda. And then the last part there is just, it's not in the code right now, but we do provide the ability for, particularly in e-submission, for the recorders to change the fee. And we do provide a mechanism to say why the fee is being changed. Seems logical to just say that. And this is an appropriate place to put that in the code. So any concerns with that?
I guess I think more just of what we know is the obvious, we could suggest they correct and resubmit, you know, such as a notary or a seal or a date or something like that.
And that would only apply to e-submission. Otherwise, we send it back and get more money or call them.
Right.
Nancy, what do you do if you're returning a paper document? Do you include a reason?
Say that again.
If you're returning a paper document in the mail, what's your process?
If we return it, and if it's only short on funds, we call them and have them send us a check. If we're returning documents, we have a whole correction sheet that lists everything that's wrong and lists the correct fees that they need to fix.
So even your handling of the paper document would conform to this, right? Because you are notifying them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know adjusted the fees. I don't,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
you're suggesting that with respect to adjusting the fee, maybe we need to account for the differences between electronic and a physical document.
yes.
Thank you. I'll see if I can work on some language to address that. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
You're doing good. Does anybody need a 5-minute break?
Appreciate the encouragement. Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, take a break if you need one. This should be an interesting part of the discussion. So, in the on your packet, and I'm on page 32. We have had some good, healthy discussions over the past months about the non-conforming document fee. And I understand the arguments and the positions that have been taken. And it has been suggested that we should apply the non-standard fee in each submission the way it is in the paper world. And I don't think I have held back my opinion that that would be not a good thing to do in terms of relationships with stakeholders. I went back and looked at the PRIA white paper that they did about a decade ago on the subject of non-conforming fees, and basically what they described is that the historical basis for a non-conforming fee was to provide an incentive for preparers to do things the right way. And I infer from the way the paper was written that the group that wrote the paper at that time sort of concluded that that policy really didn't work very well, and led to sort of a statement that, we may as well just decline them and not go through this to try and penalize anybody or to provide the financial incentive. And my thought would be that generally, if the recorders wanted to continue to do that in the paper world, I guess I can't argue with it, but I do think it would be a mistake to do it in each submission. And it's something that I think you should expect that the stakeholders would object to. So I'm at least throwing it out there that some consideration be given to the outright repeal of the non-standard fee section. Doesn't seem to be a big source of revenue. I think it could be perceived as a nice gesture to the stakeholder groups to say, hey, we aren't going to do this anymore, but we want you to follow the new standards that we're adopting here. And I think that would be a good approach to take in terms of the overall package. If you decided to keep it in the paper world, then the alternative I've listed just simply removes the dates. There's no reason to have the dates in there anymore, and just refer to the fact that it applies to physical documents. So I've stated my case. What are your wishes?
I kind of agree because I just, if it doesn't meet the formatting standards, I usually send it back, give it back to the people to make all the corrections, because if it doesn't have exemption codes or the 3-inch top margin, why am I going to record theirs and make everybody else follow the rules? And usually they leave out important information, so then it's probably not really a legal binding document when they leave out some information that needs to be on the formatting standards. So I usually just make them correct it and not charge the extra $10. Like when we had a sovereign citizen bringing a 26-page document, I gave him the formatting standards list and told him he had to make the changes, and then I could record it.
I agree. I'm going to treat them all the same. I'm going to decline it, whether it's paper or, if there's no preparer, I'm sorry, you don't get to record it. I don't think it should be different rules. If we do away with the $10 to get something, I'm a little iffy on that, but I definitely want them treated the same.
Yeah, they signed them wrong, but she called up. Okay, so we just have to sign this sign, because I tried looking it up, there's nothing in it for his thing to.
Other comments? Any other comments?
I think I've said it before, Phil. My only thing is if we put it in here to repeal it, and of course, we'd have to all agree as a legislative thing, that they don't give us our fee increase, but they take that, they put that in there that they don't have to pay that anymore.
Right. I would just say, you know, what do you, what should you expect to have happen next? So, I'm not to get ahead of myself, but you've all made really good suggestions, and we're gonna make another pass at this and go do some editing, and then we're gonna feed it back to you all, okay? And the idea would be that I understand that at some point, because you're talking about a legislative change, you know, you've got a process to go through as an association, and there's going to be dialogue about it. So this is something that would be advanced as a recommendation from the working group and the standards subcommittee, but it's not. This is not adoption of ESS policy. This is a statutory change. So you got to go through your processes, and I think everybody would have a shot at it. And let's also recognize that not too far down the road, that a draft emphasizing underlining draft, you know, would be shared with the stakeholders for their review and reaction as well. And there'll be dialogue about it. So we'll see we'll have to see how the conversation unfolds. But you know, what you're doing today doesn't make it law. A whole other process that will follow this, but you've had really good discussion. So I'm reading the messages in the chat pod. That leads me to believe that most would be comfortable with the idea of just saying the rules are the rules are the rules, and we're not going to record stuff that doesn't follow the rules. We're going to decline it, and then and that it really doesn't happen that often anyway. That's what I hear.
I
Am
mean,
I
we've
right?
had these standards for 20 years, so it's pretty staple stuff.
Okay. All right. So then we will move on. And this brings us to section 7B, and I'm recommending the repeal of that as well. And the fundamental rationale is, especially given your earlier action, where in the very first thing we did, we changed may to shall. If it's shall, you definitely have the authority to decline documents that don't conform to not just these specific paragraphs, but any part of the standard. You would have the foundation for declining it. So my fundamental argument on this section is it's not necessary. You have the authority in the earlier section of the code. Why does it need to be repeated here? That's my thought.
Sure, yeah. Thanks.
Comments?
That smells good. Have
I
some
would
more.
agree.
Tell me if my logic is wrong.
Sounds good. I haven't compared every little thing, but it
If
sounds good.
I answering Katie's question back to the earlier discussion, yes, if you repeal that if you repeal section 7A, there is no longer a non-standard fee, period. You know, it's approve or accept. I mean, approve or decline.
They would just have to fix whatever is wrong and then bring it back. Resubmit it, whatever it is.
Or e-submit it if they send it in the mail and it's double-sided. Not that they ever would do something like that, but could.
I guess I'm not.
When we,
I'm not.
I'm sorry, I'm late. When we've had a double-sided, they didn't want to pay the extra fee. They photocopied, except for the signature page, they photocopied those pages on the back side, put an X through the back of the original page and used it that way. If they have to do that, I guess they have to do that.
So there is a workaround in that kind of a case.
Yes, most of the time.
Yeah. So I'm going back. We're going back to 7A. Is everybody still okay with 7A as presented? Anybody? All right.
But it still says physical. They,
well, look, you have to look at the very first part. I mean, it's just repealed, period. If you said you wanted to keep the
that's okay.
non-standard fee for paper documents, we would do that by just inserting the word physical, and then you could continue to do it. And I'm not going to argue with you over that. I think a repeal sends a better message to the stakeholder groups. It would be ironic if they turned around and said, no, we want to pay the non-standard fee. I don't think that will happen, but I suppose it could. But if you really wanted to keep that option in the paper world, I certainly am not going to resist you on that. But correcting things in e-submission is so fast and easy. There is just no reason to have a non-standard fee in e-submission. You should just define it and tell them what to do and let them fix it.
I think my point was just, do we lay all our cards on the table at once, or if you just talk to them about it before actually putting it in there?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I would say let's see if we can get a clean version of this put together and then decide, how to approach it. So is this one you want to think about a little bit?
That for you. That could be
Probably a good idea.
Okay. And then does my logic hold on 7B that you really don't need it if you clearly have the authority to decline, which I think you do.
I'm okay with it. Anybody else?
I would say take it out.
Okay, let's move on because we're in our last hour here. I'm on 331-606, and this would be concerning the notary information, and this is new. There is a PRIA group that's working on indexing standards. They're not. It looks like, and Lisa, you can chime in because you participate in that group, but it doesn't look like they're going to make a definitive. Everybody should do this. What they're doing is sort of identifying things that could be indexed, and they're listing pros and cons. And the pro side of it is as a means of fraud prevention, does it make sense for us to somehow keep track of what the notaries are doing? And it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be publicly presented in the Allen Land Record Search, but it might be searchable, from the standpoint of being able to analyze or provide information to appropriate activity to law enforcement or to the Secretary of State's office, whoever it may be, with the idea that you could begin to analyze patterns of behavior that might be suspicious. And the only reason we would raise that as a need is that we know that crooked notaries are a source of fraud in the real estate industry. So thinking of ways that, okay, what could we do? And we're bringing it to you because it has been talked about. Is that something that you want to pursue? Miranda's pointing out that not all seals have a commission number. It could be by name. Commission number is more common. So I think it's an unknown on the ROI in terms of would it be an effective tool. Don't know the answer to that question. Does it incrementally add more work to the recorder's office to pay attention to the commission numbers and to put it in their index? Yes, it would. How does that balance out against the overall objective of a fee change? I don't know. So I'm not so much bringing this to you as a recommendation as it is something to consider, open for conversation.
I think we would have to add if available, because there are states who do not use those, the commission number.
How would you, in that case, what would you use to identify the notary then?
They may have a seal with their name and the state, but it doesn't always have a commission number.
Right. So one of the points was including notary names can enhance the authentication and verification process of documents. It provides transparency and allows individuals to verify the legitimacy of the notarization.
If I could add a comment, I never really thought of this until I went to PRIA in Omaha. And the way they talked about it, that they suspected some fraud, and they were able to, since I don't remember what state, since they indexed the notary commission number, not saying that we have to do the commission number, but they were able to search by that commission number and brought up every single document that that person notarized as evidence. And it was like in 2 seconds, which I really never thought about. But if you think about, as we go forward with the fee modernization, working in conjunction with the Secretary of State's office to prevent fraud, this is another, another good working relationships and something that we could all think about. It might be a little bit more work, but we're already looking, when we review the document, we're already looking at the notary. Can we read it? Can we read the commission number? So as far as the added work, I don't think it would be a lot of work. It's no different than entering the parcel ID number. And that's my own personal opinion. And I kind of talked about it with my staff as well. And they're like, if it's there, we'll index it. So that's,
Yeah, I
that's
don't
pretty
mind
much,
it. Go ahead.
no, that's all I wanted to say. I don't know. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, I don't know. The work is nothing. I mean, I think it is a good thing to include it. I'm just saying we don't always have a commission number, so it should say if available, but the name also, because I can put in the name. That would be easy to do.
I agree with like put name or commission number because of not having it, or sometimes you might not be able to read one or two numbers on that commission numbers. We've had several lately that the stamps are bad and we've declined and say they need to have a better notary stamp on it. But we just also had a possible fake marriage happen and stuff. So our police officers here are investigating the notary and everything on that because supposedly the one person said they were in prison at the time and they really didn't get married. But anyways, so that is, I mean, we think here in a small town, Iowa, it's not going to happen, but it is happening. Whether it was a fake notary or the person that did say they notarized it really didn't witness the signature.
We had an incident of that exact same thing here like a week and a half ago. Come through. So the notary was not present at having people sign a document.
Must be something in the air because we had it about 3 weeks ago.
And we also just had a document come through a couple weeks ago where the purchaser of the property notarized the document.
People.
So, how would you characterize this? Is this something that maybe the group would like to? This is the first time we've presented this idea. This is your first. You may have thought about it, but it's the first time we put it on the agenda and talked about. Is this one that you want to just keep in a holding pattern and say, let's think about this and then talk about it at our next meeting? Is that where you might be at this point? I would.
I think it's a good one to think over. The pros and cons.
I do want to respond to Joe Lynn's question in the chat pod. Yes, we would definitely have to work with the local service providers to make sure that is there. I don't think it would be a difficult thing for them to do. But in fact, we're going to have a meeting with our quarterly meeting with our service provider friends is this Thursday afternoon. So, we can mention it to them and just politely inquire how many of you would have difficulty doing this. I don't think it would be a difficult issue at all. You'd have to understand that everything would be taped forward. There's no going back into history, but that is something I'm reasonably certain they would be able to do. Okay. So I hear support for the idea of putting this in the bin for consideration, ongoing consideration. We are going to have another meeting in the spring, so we've got time to think about that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as a part of the same thing, I want to point out that there is also a phrase in here that relates to indexing consideration amounts, and there are from the reading that I have done, there are 3 types of considerations, 2 of which are already fielded in our database and 1 which is not. And the fields that are part of consideration are the transaction amount, that is the sale amount. Then there is another defined consideration that references the mortgage amount. And then the third one that I'm aware of that is used in other jurisdictions is lien amount. So like a state tax lien or a federal tax lien, there are those who would actually record that information as well. I don't know how prevalent it is. The only thing I know for sure is those are the three ones that seem to be in the literature and referred to. We, in our land records, in the PREA document, so to speak, we have space for, but don't use the consideration amount. We don't consistently use the consideration amount for the recorded, the sale amount and also the mortgage amount. Those are fields that we do have, but they aren't consistently used. We haven't measured the value or interest in indexing that information, but in the same context as the notary issue, is that something that we want to have a conversation about in terms of having counties do things more consistently. And if it's done consistently, then we can present that information through the search application at Iowa Land Records.
I personally don't think we need the consideration amount. I mean, they can read the document as far as like the mortgage. I know they can't see the DOV, but I think probably everyone's assessor's site says then what the property sold for. So I don't know. I feel like it might be some redundancy, and why do we need to give everybody all that information if they can find it elsewhere? But and many of our consideration amounts, like if it was between family members or whatever, I mean, might say under $500 or whatever, so it doesn't have an exact amount.
Right.
We've always put it in here.
We put it in on a sale because it calculates the transfer tax and makes sure that we did it right.
Right. Well, we do that too, but we're not actually indexing it in another field. We're just doing it so it figures out the fees.
Ours
It
goes
shows,
in
it shows
too.
in our indexing.
Ours does too. Public information, doesn't matter what we pay for it.
In
So-
Lynn County, we key it in, but it does not show in the indexing. You would have to go to the table to see if it said like $143.20 was the transfer tax amount. That you'd have to go to the table to see what the actual dollar amount is.
Yeah, I think that's how ours is too. But and on a mortgage, we don't put the amount mortgaged anywhere on indexing.
We don't either. It's not always. There's a promissory note, but that doesn't always mean the same thing.
And I
Well-
don't know too, on some mortgages, they might be like an open-ended mortgage. So which to me, that might be like a construction loan. So you really don't know
Yeah.
how much money they're taking out. They can go up to that amount.
Recognizing that there are some definitional issues that we would have to answer in terms of sort of prescribing, what do we mean exactly and what needs to be indexed, and probably needs to be done more thoroughly than just adding the phrase the consideration amount for the transaction. I do understand that there is information available in other databases, even when we could connect to those other systems. It's certainly not perfect, and I think that there is some interest in having more direct access to the information and I guess I would raise the question from the standpoint of, we're trying to increase the value and appreciation of the real estate community into the value of recorders and the our land record system specifically. In my case, that's what obviously I'm focused in on most of the time. And so if we can do something that could be consistently done across the 99 counties, and then available to be presented to the stakeholder groups, the customer, then is that something that would have some value to them to say, hey, I'm more likely I'm going to support this fee change thing because I would love it if they started doing that. And right now it's not consistently done enough for us to put it as a field that is in display in our land records, because we would be raising false expectations. They would say, well, there's no data here, and they would be right in a lot of cases. So it would be something that our land records could be invested in more if it were done consistently. And then sort of in the context that we talked about in the beginning, is this something that we could do that would be valuable to our stakeholder groups, that would then put them in a better position to be supportive of our other policy goals? So that is the context in which I bring both of these issues up. Notary, hey, maybe we can help prevent or fraud or catch the crooks if we do this. And the consideration amount, we just added valuable data that somebody might be able to access directly through our land records without having to go to somebody else's site.
So why are the DOVs confidential? I figured maybe that was because of what people paid for.
I'm not sure I know the full answer to this question, except to say that the Code of Iowa says they are right now.
So that's what I was wondering, why
Yeah.
they're confidential, if that was a reason, because they don't want people to know.
I think the Department of Revenue historically, taxpayer privacy has been a big issue for them, not just in the context of returns. So, but with a little modification and the fact that we would likely redact personally identifiable information if they were recorded, they could be made available. So the answer is we could do that, but we would definitely require a law change. And if we were to propose that DOBs start being recorded, I honestly don't know what the Department of Revenue's position on that would be. And particularly from the standpoint of, and then we'd have to think of the stakeholders who would say, well, maybe they would or would not want to pay a recording fee for a DOB. This is something that we can talk about with them and see how they react to it. So if you're asking me technically, can we do it? Heck yes, we could do it.
We can drop the info and see what happens.
Do we know if they really are confidential?
Yeah.
Because I know that my assessor's office has distributed them to people.
Yeah.
They do redact certain info off of them, but they do give them to people if they ask for.
Well, let's add, here's my interpretation of what was just offered up. Instead of indexing the consideration amount, let's just do it in conjunction with the DOVs. I would ask your permission between now and your next meeting to noodle up some thoughts on how would we do that, and what would we do so that we could maybe talk to either the Department of Revenue about it or talk to the stakeholders about it, see if they would be interested in it. because they're the ones that would benefit from having easy access to the information. So let's see. Do you give me permission to research this further?
Doesn't hurt. Go ahead.
All
I
right.
think so.
I love it when people give me more work to do. Okay. Then we've completed the document formatting topics, and I just have two other policy topics that could be a part of this discussion. They aren't in the document formatting section of the code, but there are things that we have talked about at different points in time. And one of them relates to the subject of additional transactions. So a few years ago, I know Jolynn would remember this, but we went through a pretty good planning process talking about defining what additional transactions were. And one of the things that was decided is that if there is a reference to a previously recorded document, and all it is a reference, that the additional transaction fee should not be charged. The only time we should be charging for an additional transaction is if it is a action, is a transaction. That's what the ESS policy currently says. You guys adapted that. We pretty sure that not everybody does it that way exactly, because there's no police running around trying to enforce that. So as I'm working on this whole issue of updating the code, I stumbled across literally the definition of a transaction and said, that doesn't match up with what our policy is, and maybe we should clarify that. So a potential change that could be woven into this whole fabric is to clarify that a transaction has to be an action, that it can't just be a reference, and to state more specifically that a simple reference to a previous action, which itself takes no subsequent action, is not a transaction. And this would actually align better with the policy that you've adopted than what the current statute says. So
Right.
here you are. I've identified an area of improvement that aligns with policy that you've already adopted. And again, this is the first time we're presenting this to you. So welcoming comments, but asking for you to think about it between now and the next meeting. I'll be quiet. What are your thoughts initially?
So back in the day, with regards to this definition, Doug Winkie and I sat down at a restaurant in Monona and hashed this out for like 2.5 hours. The discussion of the definition of a transaction. And we both concluded that the document has to have an action to it in order to charge the transaction fee. And this basically makes that probably clearer than maybe what we had, or at least adjust that to make it understand to understand it better, that the document has to be doing something to a previously recorded document, not just referencing it out there. Did I make myself clear on that? I hope. Because we brought the definition back to the ESS committee, because I do believe we were both on the governing board at the time. There's your history lesson for today.
So are you, forgive me, I'm trying to make sure I understand this right, but are you talking about adding a monetary value for, in addition to second, like if it's a release is referencing 2 mortgages, are you also talking about a additional fee for like assignments as well?
Well, an assignment is an action. And if you have, and so if you record a document and it assigns property from party A to party B, that's a recorded document. But if that same document were to assign parcel A, B, C, and D, B, C, and D would be additional transactions because they're being assigned. And that's what most everybody does, not arguing with that. but there were cases that we looked at a few years ago where I think they were wind farms or something, and there wasn't really an exchange of property, but there was some technical adjustment being made, and all these references were being made, and there really wasn't any action being taken to transfer, assign, or anything. And so the question came up, should we be charging an additional transaction of $7 for each one of those things, as if it's just a reference? And the committee and the subcommittee and I should say, the standard subcommittee and the full ESS committee said, no, we shouldn't be doing that. And that is the current policy that's been adopted. To me, all I'm trying to do is saying, this might be a clarification to make sure that everybody understands that a reference that doesn't do anything is not really a transaction.
I guess I can think of the particular document that possibly was causing some anxiety. It was a supplemental mortgage that, like, I think it was Interstate Power or Alliant Energy. I don't really remember which one was recording, and it was listed all of the previous supplemental mortgages and the mortgage within the body of the new supplemental mortgage. And some counties were charging for every single one of those. And it really wasn't doing anything other than adding another supplemental mortgage to what was already there. It just listed them because.
I don't think in my year here we've added an extra transaction fee, unless the only possibly thing I can think of is if on a mortgage release they tried releasing two different mortgages on one document. But other than that, I don't think we've ever added a second transaction.
It's very seldom.
That's our policy too. I just wanted to be clear on that we weren't trying to change something else in addition to.
No, because if the assignment is a separate recorded document, so if you're going to release both, that's two actions.
Yes, so I was just checking on that since I missed initial discussion.
Okay, so I'm putting this in the category of think about between now and the next meeting, and just as a clarification, to me, I could see this being wrapped into, we're doing things better here, and we're making sure that we're not overcharging anybody, and that's that sort of thing. I know it's a small thing, but it potentially could be persuasive. The last policy idea that I want to present to you for discussion is, this is a tricky one, but I'll mention it, that I think it is a true statement that if we ask our users, what is the thing that frustrates them probably more than anything else, is that there is not consistency in indexing. Usually that has to do with legal location descriptions. It usually means that not everybody parses their information maybe the way they should, or maybe they've only started doing it recently. And looking back in history, it just is pretty hard to search by location information if you go back into the 80s or before, for sure. So the same thing applies but to a lesser extent, I would acknowledge, but it still applies in searching by reference number. And I would just ask you to consider, is there any reason why you shouldn't all be using the same reference numbering methodology going forward at some point. And I would just ask, what would that potentially have an impact in showing modernization, showing commitment to consistency. And I am not saying that the counties that choose to should stop using book and page if they wanted to continue to do that in addition to, but an argument could be made that every county should be using the document reference number method and that they maybe should be doing it consistently. And what I've presented on page 37 is just one concept, okay? I'm not trying to say that one thing is better than another, but what this represents is an example where the number could be the two-digit number assigned to each county, and then followed by the year in which the recording or the transaction took place, and then followed by a sequential number up to 8 digits. I think I've got 8 digits there. And the idea would be everybody kind of does that the same way, and every number is unique because it's preceded by the county number. And so you could search by reference number statewide and get to the specific county in that particular year if everybody did it this way. This is just an example, and I'm going to tiptoe gingerly away before people start shooting at me. But I do want to introduce this as a discussion item in the context of demonstrating commitment to standards and uniformity. So I see Katie Carlton's put a note in there. It says abstractors might not like this very much. But I suppose you could continue to use book and page, but some consistency here. There's an argument to be made for it, and I'm genuinely putting it out there for you guys to think about, and we can talk about it at a future meeting. But this would be a demonstrable step toward modernization, in my view. There you are.
I think it looks good, but I think a dash between the county and the rest of the numbers without zeros leading, in my opinion, I would like that better.
Format is subject to discussion. I think, and you've heard me say this before, I don't care what you decide, just I'll do it the same way and then it'll be good. So we can talk about that.
I think when you think about it, if somebody calls us and tells us, hey, we need a copy of, book 23, page 497. I have multiple book 23s in my vault. So if we were to standardize this, I think future generations, it would make it easier for them to search our records if we standardize whether we're book and page or instrument number. Just looking back at how difficult it can be historically.
Yep. Yeah, you can't change the history, and nor would I recommend that you do it. This is, it would have to be day forward at some point in time. And I agree with Aaron's comment in the chat pod. Definitely something that would have to be discussed with the service providers, no doubt. I also have no doubt that they would be able to do it. So I offer you this for you guys to think about, and again, we'll talk about it maybe the next time around. If you wanted to shoot me an email with not shoot me, but shoot me an email, then offer your suggestion. Here's what I think. If we all did it the same way, here's what I think it should be, and that we can just add that to the mix in the next discussion. With that, thank you for indulging me on that. We're got just a few minutes left, and I wanted to just give you a few updates, and then we can talk about anything else you want to. The ESS committee did not take action at their previous meeting on the policy relating to associated references and parcel identification numbers. I think we resolved most of the questions, but we just ran out of time. We had too many other things going on at that meeting. So we're likely to bring it up again at the November meeting. I would say that with some of the policy changes that have been advanced with respect to 331-606B, that instead of adopting the policy now and then the legislation later, there is an argument to be made for just hanging on to that for a while and then seeing where the legislative discussion goes. But I just wanted to give you an update. The ESS committee did not reject it. They did not defer because they didn't like it. They just literally ran out of time at their last meeting. So we will be discussing that again. Then a few software development updates. I believe a notice went out earlier this week, or maybe it was yesterday, I guess, that speaks to a change to the recently recorded search tool. We just have had many issues with recently recorded, particularly in the larger counties, and it all has to do with the search algorithm. In order to make that workable for everybody, we needed to make some changes, and that's why it really will become a recently recorded report, not a most recent 500 documents report. And that means that the way it's constructed, that you will need to monitor it contemporaneously to make sure that whatever information you want to get is get in the week in which it gets recorded. Because in order to make the algorithm work, we have to sort of wipe the slate clean and start again the following week. I have received some pushback on this, that it would be more acceptable if we also offered an additional search option to search by county and date range, which does not currently exist in e-submission. I think we understand that the addition of that, if we're going to make this change in the recently recorded, that we probably need to add that option as well. So in the meantime, I encourage everybody to make sure you're monitoring recently recorded every week and getting what you need from that. Otherwise, you're going to have to search by group number or submission number or by the submitter name. I know that will be a little bit more painful for some, but in order to address some of the really serious issues that some counties are having, we need to make this change. So just know that we are going to work on the creation of the new search by county and date range. That will be added to our to-do list, and we'll get it done as soon as we can. So I wanted you to understand why we were doing that, and that it is likely to be implemented this coming weekend.
Bill, I have a question on that. I hate to
Yes.
sound like a broken record, but we still can't search, like, we don't know who submitted something, but they want us to, or we need to bring it up for whatever reason. We still can't search by date submitted only. And I thought they were gonna try to fix that.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about, Nancy. We know that needs to be created, and we are going to do that.
Okay, all right, that's what I was making sure.
Yep. The only other technical thing I really feel compelled to tell you about is that we are moving our system to the cloud, and the configuration of that is underway, and we're hoping to have that implemented by the middle of February. So a very big technical change, but one that we think is going to serve us very well. So Anyway, I think I'm gonna stop there. Other topics that the standard subcommittee and the working group, any of you would like to talk about or address, or any questions that you might have. Nancy, I see your note. What do you
No,
think?
that's just why I asked the question, because
Oh,
I had
okay.
something go on here. I'm
Oh, okay.
sorry.
All right, you got it.
My
You got it.
my comment though on the meetings would be, these are kind of hard to do. For April 23rd, is it possible to do that face to face? I know it's an extra trip, but that's 4 hours. It's a lot.
Which are you talking about, the next standards meeting?
Yeah, the
Uh,
Thursday, April 23rd
yeah.
says virtual.
I don't hold me to the 4 hours yet. Okay. Let's see how we do. But the answer is yes. If it warrants it, we could convert to a face-to-face meeting. Yes. So let's see how it pulls together. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. I would just like to express appreciation and thanks to everybody on the standards subcommittee. This has been a lot to digest. I think the comments that everybody has made have been fantastic and have informed decision making. It's exactly what you want to see happen with the policy group, and I think you've all done a great job. I think there are some folks here who are observing and wanting to see what happens. If you felt like you were, a little bit reticent, do not wait. Send a note to me. Send a note to Nancy, or send a note to any of the members of the standards subcommittee. If you feel like we did not address anything appropriately or adequately, or I hope you all felt like that, that we're open to dialogue and all working toward the same goal, particularly with the big initiative that the association is advancing. It's important work that you're doing, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it. So, any final comments, anybody else?
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Stay warm, be careful and safe out there, and we'll be in touch with you soon. I will be working on updates as you requested here today, and I'll get a clean draft out to you as soon as I can. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bill, you're gonna download the chat notes.
I will. Thank you. Hang on.
Thank you.